Hello, everybody, all at once. This is Theo Cedar Jones, and I wanted to invite everybody to celebrate this July 4th, 2018, not only as American Independence Day, but as Earth Sovereignty Day. What does Earth Sovereignty Day mean? Earth Sovereignty Day means that Earth Gaia and all her people are free from being the slaves or chattel of any on or off-planet species. The cabal is presently collapsing. Now is the time for Earth and her people to stand together in cooperation and prior unity in order for our planetary sovereignty to be preserved in the face of any forces that might be tempted to step into the new power vacuum on Earth, afforded by the collapse of the New World Order, and attempt to impose a less than humane system that favors their interests. Sovereign peoples of Earth must show themselves capable of managing their own affairs. And that is why we are organizing the Global Cooperative Forum, which is guided by the divinely realized presence and authority of the principles in the Firm, the Free Union of Renunciate Messengers. But to replace the cabal in the most benign way, we need to rapidly co-create new organs of civilization, or cooperative unions. We need cooperative unions to organize heretofore under-organized groups. These groups include youth, rock bands, sex workers, takers of marijuana and psychedelic drugs, and everybody all at once. These are the groups that historically have been denied their basic rights, including their very powers of consent. For example, youth are seen in America and other societies to lack basic powers of consent. And we have a very strange system where up until the age of 18, you have virtually no human rights or powers of consent. And then suddenly at 18, you're given full adult responsibilities, and coincidentally, right at age 18 is when most youth are seduced into an agreement to get into debt bondage with student loans. So the minute you're emancipated or free as a youth at age 18, or whatever age it is in the state or country that you're in, you're immediately drawn into some form of slavery. You can't just be a free youth. There's no support in this culture to be a free and sovereign youth. You're assumed to be a kind of slave or vegetable until you turn 18. And the moment you turn 18, you're expected to get into some form of debt slavery from student loans that leads to wage slavery to pay off the debts, that leads to a lifetime of financial and mental slavery. And that's what college is preparing you for, and that's what these student loans are getting you embroiled in if you're a young person. So, youth are deprived of their sovereignty, of their powers of consent, and this leaves them vulnerable to be traded and procured and exploited and trafficked, literally, as food, as sex slaves, and as labor slaves. And this is a huge, huge global problem. And my theory is that adults have proven themselves historically unwilling or incapable of protecting youth. And the only people on this planet that can be expected to care and take care of and protect youth are other youth. And so it is imperative for the protection and sake of youth that a maximum number of youth are brought into the cooperative union that represents them, which is the Fury. And the Fury is the FURY, or the Free Union of Radical Youth, which is the global international union of all young people in the world, and represents the interests of all young people in the world. So it has been in the interests of the cabal to disempower youth and keep them as slaves, keep them as property, and ambiguate the whole process of the rite of passage of coming into the full power and emancipation and sovereignty of an adult. All of that is made a part of occult rituals that no longer take place in our society. We don't have what rite of passages occur in tribal societies. Well, we need to reinitiate that, and it would be the job of the Fury, of this Free Union of Radical Youth, to reinstitute global rites of passage for all youth and young people, so that they can, by demonstration, show their capabilities to assume adult responsibility, regardless of what age they might happen to be. The one-size-fits-all age of consent laws were designed by global pedophile elites to support their global trafficking systems and do nothing to protect youth, and do much to cover up the activities of Child Protective Services and other organizations that supposedly are instituted to protect the interests of youth, but in fact are there to be predators on the innocents. So, the first cooperative union I am proposing is the Fury. The second group that has heretofore had its powers of consent constantly denied are rock bands. Rock bands have been assaulted by the Illuminati in so many ways, in every way that dirty tricks are imagined by the CIA. For example, assassination. I believe many of our greatest rock stars were just out and out murdered. Mind controlled, enslaved, raped, had their intellectual property stolen, had their rights and their money and their capacity to be a free creative person taken from them. And I could go down a long list of examples, but I don't think that is the place of this particular video. But I would just mention the names of Kurt Cobain, Chester Bennington, and Chris Cornell, just for starters, to point to how the cabal, the Illuminati, has used rock bands and rock stars and rock musicians for the purposes of mind controlling the masses, mind controlling other musicians and artists, and creating a farm system of sex slaves for the elites in the entertainment industry and in the Illuminati altogether to rape musicians, rape artists with impunity. So there's a whole pyramid system kept in secrecy and enforced through blackmail that makes it so that it is impossible for a rock musician or a rock band to do their line of work without being corrupted or killed or forced into some form of being weaponized against their own fans to mind control and deliver satanic messages, or to be involved in ritual sacrifice of children and raping of children and all kinds of horrible crimes. How can you have sovereignty and the powers of consent as a rock band or a musician in such conditions? So that's how consent has been suppressed or destroyed by this Illuminati and satanic controlled rock music industry. So that's why we need the GURM. The GURM. the Global Union of Rock Musicians. Rock musicians, rock bands, and rock stars need to band together and create mutual support, mutual aid, mutual protection, and mutual opportunities for full employment through a system of cooperatively owned all-ages clubs, radio stations, and record labels that support local bands in every city of the world in a way that bypasses the satanic, Illuminati-controlled entertainment industry. So that's the second cooperative union that I'm calling for in order for us to enforce and enable and empower true Earth sovereignty. How can Earth be sovereign when her people are enslaved? So we must bring up each of these enslaved groups that have been scattered, fragmented, and atomized, not able to cooperate, not able to bring forth their innate strength until now. Now that the stave has been removed from the wheels, the cabal is crumbling, and Adida destroyed the ego culture at its root in 2000. We now have the opportunity to create global cooperative unions to represent the interests of these constituencies and these groups which have heretofore had their consent crushed, had their powers of consent denied. The third group to be represented by a cooperative union are all the sex workers of the world. The prostitutes, the whores, the porn actors, the people with a webcam in their dorm room, all the people who make money from sex, who make art and culture from sex, need to be protected. And the only people that can be dependent on them to protect them are themselves. So I'm calling on all the sex workers of the world to create the SWN, the Sex Workers Network, or the Sacred Whores Network, or SWAN, or SAWN, however you want to say it. It's been in the strategic interests of the cabal to keep all sex workers disorganized because there's a vast, illegal, illicit, secretive human sex trade on this planet that's highly profitable for the cabal in terms of money, but also in terms of social control that they gain through using sex workers as a form of blackmail of priests and politicians and other people in positions of influence. So by bringing sex workers into the light of organizing themselves in a cooperative manner globally, they bring themselves out of these secret networks that are of exploitation and abuse that the cabal has enforced up until now. So we're taking the power of the sex workers away from the cabal and giving it to the workers themselves. The fourth group to gain the powers of a cooperative union are all the people that take marijuana and psychedelic drugs, the trippers. Boy, has that group gotten the short end of the stick in society, and they have less defense or groups organized in their interests than black people or Native Americans or homosexuals or even people that do ballet or poetry have more organization and self-protection than the people who have been trippers. This constituency really needs support, and who can they depend on to protect and defend themselves other than themselves? So I call on the trippers to mutually create a cooperative union called the TAO, the Tao. Or Trippers as One. Trippers as One, TAO. And finally, the fifth group that gets no support, no recognition, no protection is the totality. The totality gets no recognition, no support, no protection. Everybody all at once gets no recognition, no support, no protection in this world. Until now. And that's why, since 2008, I have been, and others, organizing the Global Cooperative Forum on behalf of everybody all at once. So that these groups that I just mentioned, the youth, the rock bands, the sex workers, the trippers, and the totality, which have heretofore been disempowered, had their consent crushed and denied, in order to support the strategic interests of the cabal, are now being empowered and brought to the fore of global governance, global arts and culture, global power for everybody all at once. That's going to replace the cabal and make this transition process of filling in the vacuum left by the collapsing cabal more benign and less stressful. This is the moment where humans step up and show their creative wherewithal to self-organize cooperatively. So, through these cooperative unions, guided by the wisdom of the firm, empowered by the global power of the Global Cooperative Forum, will take their position of power in the world, but they will do so in such a way that they will not become the new cult, the new ego center of false power in the world. How? How in the world will we avoid the mistakes of the past? Through three basic means. All the cooperative unions will be empowered via a prior unity social contract. So the participants are making a vow, an affirmation of prior unity as the basis of their actions. Secondly, everyone will have access to a real-time webinar-based virtual commons. Thirdly, everyone will have access to Not To His Peace education. And all of this will be taking place under the umbrella of the firm, the Free Union of Renunciate Messengers, which is composed right now of Adi Das Samraj and Santosha Tantra, the two global seven-stage realizers, man and woman, matched and divine, who are themselves the greatest example of egolessness and prior unity for all to behold. They are the overlighting guidance of all of this, keeping it right, keeping it straight. Because they're straight, they're the only ones who are. We can rely on Adida and Santosha Tantra as the living presence and example to guide us as we take on this new global power of everybody all at once. So this is how all the power of everybody all at once will be channeled through the Fury, the Germ, the Swan, the Tao, the Global Cooperative Forum, so that the ultimate result is true freedom for the people. And true freedom means freedom from the ego within and freedom from the ego without, the collective ego. And that's why the ultimate state of the cooperative unions under the Global Cooperative Forum and the firm is ultimately egoless sovereignty. A state where you're in full possession of your rights, your powers of consent, but you're not animating those powers from the position of self-contraction, but from the radiant position of seven-stage realization or prior unity. And so that is the spirit in which I invoke Earth Sovereignty Day, July 4th, 2018.